Back in the summer of 2010, I fell victim to unexpected predators. Predators so unexpected, I can hardly believe it really happened when I look back on it. It was a type of experience that made me question whether or not I would survive. I was out late with my boyfriend, Richie. We were both 17 or 18 years old and had just graduated trade school, where we also met. We were living together on our own. We were living our best lives, no matter how little money we had. We loved spending most nights with one of our best friends at the time. His name was Daniel. Most nights we spent with Daniel were filled with late night drives, munchie runs, and video game sleepovers. We always had fun, just laughing and being dumb kids. We didn't really party or surround ourselves with drama or drugs. We did, however, like to drink once in a while. I don't approve of underage drinking at all now, but I know it happens. It is reality. This particular night, we had done what we did most nights. We drove around in Daniel's black two-door Honda Civic. We were listening to Skrillex, blasting it all the way up. We decided to go to the grocery store to pick up some snacks and some wine coolers. At the time, I was texting my best girlfriend, Charlotte. It was around 7 p.m. and I missed her so much, so I asked her if she wanted us to go pick her up. She was off work and said, "Yes, absolutely." "Charlotte wants to hang out with us," I told Daniel. "Alright, we'll go get her. Tell her we're on our way." So I texted Charlotte and told her to get ready soon. I couldn't wait to see her. It had been weeks since I last seen her, and I knew that she missed me too. We did still talk every day, but seeing her is the best thing. We had talked about a new album by the band Red. She said her brother had bought it, and she said she wanted me to listen to it. I asked her to ask her brother if it was okay if I borrowed it, and he agreed, so I told her not to forget it when I picked her up. We arrived at her place around 7:30, and she lives in a mobile home community, pretty close to where we were picking up our snacks and drinks. I texted her, letting her know that we had arrived, and she came out of her place about 2 minutes later. She got in the car and we headed to Daniel's house. When we arrived, I realized that I left my wallet and the Red album in the car. I thought, it's fine, I'll get that stuff later. We sat in the kitchen and started drinking and eating some munchies. I had actually started to feel sick earlier that day, so I only drank one wine cooler. The night went well. As it progressed, we sat around talking and enjoying the night. Around 11 p.m., Charlotte all of a sudden said, "Shit, my coworker just texted me and asked me to cover her shift tomorrow morning." "No, don't leave us," I interrupted, laughing. She laughed and said, "I want to stay, but I need the extra cash." We tried to convince her to stay, but she asked if we could take her home. Daniel was really drunk at this point. I had my learner's permit at the time, so I offered her to drive since I was the only one sober. I figured it would also make good driving practice. So we proceeded to load up in the car, and I headed carefully to drop off Charlotte. We listened to music as always on the way, and laughed about how drunk Daniel was. He wasn't puking or anything, but he was saying many funny things. This is a great night, I remember thinking. We finally get to Charlotte's house, and I park in her driveway. We say our goodbyes and she got out of the car. I stayed in the driveway until I saw that she made it into her place safely. I was by no means professional at driving at this time, so I drove all the way up the street in the opposite direction we came in, so I can just turn around at the next street and make a wide turn to drive back in the opposite direction again. I was terrible at adjusting cars. Let's just say I really needed the most practice making turns and parking. When I finally turned the car around to drive in the opposite direction, I realized I positioned the car too close to another car that was parked on the street. So I pressed the brake pedal, proceeded to try to reverse away from the car I parked too close to. Just as I put the car in reverse, we all gasped as we saw a small, gray, and very shitty looking pickup reverse very quickly in front of us. I panicked a little because it was abrupt. I thought for sure that they were going to hit us. The truck stopped and I expected the driver to reposition the truck and drive away. I was very wrong. All of a sudden, two young Hispanic guys, who appeared to be in their late teens or early 20s, jumped quickly out of the truck and ran towards the Honda. I froze. I couldn't process what was happening. But one of them came to my side of the car, the other to the passenger side, where Richie was sitting. I didn't know that the car was unlocked. I regret not locking the doors because as soon as they got to the car, they opened the door and started yelling at us to get the hell out of the car. They made us get out in the fear and panic that was upon us. When I got out of the car, I looked at this guy in front of me. I felt the worst fear I had ever felt in my life. I looked into his eyes and could tell he was high or something. I saw so much hatred and anger in his eyes. I knew this guy was out to hurt someone. I made it a point not to make too much eye contact, but made sure I got a good look at him. He was about 5 foot 6 inches tall. He was thin, tan skin, and short spiky brown hair. He was wearing skinny light blue jeans and a blue plaid long sleeve shirt. On his face sat a round set of glasses with light blue tint. I didn't get a good look at the other guy because I was fixated on the threat in front of me. I just remember he had dark hair and it was about the same height as the other guy. I was so scared, I didn't even know what was going on. All I could hear was, "What the fuck are you doing at my girl's house?" Pointed at Daniel and loudly asked, "My girl's cheating on me with this fucker? Claudia's with this fucker?" At the moment, he and the other guy started going through the car. They took my wallet and the red album and threw it out on the street. I whimpered in reply, "No, we just dropped off a friend. We don't know any Claudia." He replied aloud and aggressive, "Which friend? You're lying." I didn't want to give up my best friend's name, obviously, so I responded, "Maria. We came to drop off my friend Maria. We don't know a Claudia. Please leave us alone." I was terrified and careful about what I said or did because I didn't know if they had any weapons. I know we all had the same thought because we were all trying to remain calm. I didn't try anything, even though I didn't see any weapons. In my head, I knew it was a possibility, so I tried to remain calm. Before I knew it, the spiky guy grabbed my arm and started to lead me up the street. He said, "All right, take me to your house then. I want to talk to Maria," he said calmly. "Okay, I'll take you and show you. I'll prove to you that we don't know Claudia." We walked a few feet in silence, dozens of things going through my head. I was not about to lead him to Charlotte. I thought about running for it. I thought about pleading with him. I had no idea what to do. I turned around to try to assure him again. I said, "I really don't know Claudia." He didn't say anything. He just looked at me and looked back at his friend that he had left with Richie and Daniel. I guess he decided better and didn't want to leave his partner behind because he left me alone on the street and took off running back down the street to the other guys. I took the opportunity to run behind one of the mobile homes and try to get back closer to the car. I thought about asking one of the neighbors to call the cops, but I was hesitant because, after all, it was really late at night and I probably wouldn't get an answer, or maybe if I did, I would just get the door slammed in my face. Just then, as I ran farther down the houses through the back, I saw Daniel turn the corner and headed towards me. "Where's Richie?" I frantically asked. "I don't know. We both came looking for you." Richie then appeared behind the mobile homes too, and we were just so thankful to see each other. We peered around the mobile homes and decided it was safe to go back to the car. We ran fast. I ran so fast I could feel my pants falling off. I jumped into the back seat of the car without hesitation. Daniel had sobered up by the end of all that and decided to drive home. We were all so shocked, angry, and scared that we just all knew what to do and how to position ourselves in the car. I asked them what happened while I was by myself. They said they squared up with the guys. They fist fought for a couple of minutes and the other guys took off on foot. Richie said he didn't even get hit. He said that the guy looked like he was either high or drunk. We drove back to Daniel's house. We called the cops on the way there. They arrived 10 minutes later. I was shooken up. I was crying, and my stomach felt like it was turned upside down. The cops took all our statements. They said that they'll do their best to get this solved, but we never heard anything back about the incident. Nobody blamed me for it, but I had several regrets. I thought it was my fault for not locking the door. I thought how stupid it was that I froze up. I didn't know what I was going to do when the spiky-haired guy took me alone up the street. I was terrified of what he had in mind to do with me. I didn't know those guys. I didn't know their intentions or motives. I still have no idea who the hell Carla was. I have regrets, but I know it wasn't my fault. We were all so young and hardly had any life experience. It taught us a lot. I'm just happy and now thank God that nothing worse happened. It's not my fault, and those guys shouldn't have done what they did to us. Well, I don't blame myself anymore. I think we just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. So today has been slow at work, and I've been killing time reading these stories. Maybe enough time has passed so I can share mine. I had a friend who was really into a cult. Unfortunately, I was the one that got him turned on to it. We had a mutual appreciation of the paranormal and all things weird, so I thought the subject would interest him. He started going deep into the subject, to the point where he wouldn't talk about anything else. He would actually interrupt a conversation and force the subject back to occult matters. Rude, but sometimes people go through phases where their interest is all they want to talk about. It was a mostly forgivable offense. I think I should mention that this particular friend didn't have a very large friend circle. His depression and introverted nature kept him inside a lot. He didn't have the best luck in relationships with women. His world was kind of small, and I did enjoy hanging out with him, so I did my best to be a good friend. I didn't want to brush him off because he was acting a little weirder than normal. Honestly, for the longest time, he was a totally normal guy. We'd chat and play games together on PlayStation. Sometimes we'd go see movies with my boyfriend accompanying us. We hung out all the time at the park. We went swimming, and overall had a good time hanging out. Things started to go downhill when he started to smoke DMT. I think psychedelics are amazing tools that can offer insights into your life, but they should be treated with respect. My friend got to the point where he was making it himself, and he was smoking it daily, multiple times a day. For those who aren't familiar with the substance, when you smoke it, you get transformed to a different world, and an entirely new plane of existence. Your body and yourself don't exist anymore. My personal experience with it led me to see a dragon once in this kaleidoscope of a cornucopia. People see all kinds of things on it. Imagine what that does to a person when they smoke it 30 times a day. He started telling me things like he was the reincarnated Osiris. He said that he was seeing hieroglyphics all over the place. Apparently, he had an hour-long conversations with entities in his bedroom, even when he wasn't smoking. Of course, I was very alarmed to hear all of this, and told him that he needed to take a serious break. No drugs at all for a few months, so he could find a solid footing in reality again. At this point, I was still hanging out with him because he obviously needed some help, and like I said before, he didn't have a lot of friends that could give him that. He was also the black sheep of his family, so I knew he wasn't getting any kind of support from them. He was really close to his sister, and I did reach out to her on Facebook to express my concerns. I pushed her to talk to him into getting some psychiatric help because he was slipping past the point of no return. I'm not really sure if she took my messages seriously since we didn't really know each other. Plus she is at least 6 years younger than us and possibly didn't grasp how serious the situation was becoming. In any case, I'll jump forward now to the part that things started to get real creepy. My boyfriend and I had made arrangements to hang out with our friend at the park. I didn't really want to go because I felt like I needed a break from him. I couldn't deal with it on that particular day. My boyfriend said he wasn't all that bad, and we went anyway. We get to the park, and he's his usual self, ranting about Egypt and made up gods that only he knew. He also had a large hunting knife that he kept fiddling with the whole time that we were on the walk. He told us that he had been using it in ceremonial magic and that it helped him banish negative thoughts. This made me extremely uneasy. He would do this thing where he would take the knife and make stabbing motions near his heart or head, like he was mock stabbing himself, all while holding a conversation with me and my boyfriend. I think we were both on edge and didn't know what to say or do about it. I tried to distract him from doing it by bringing up subjects that might interest him, but he kept on with his ritual. Keep in mind, we're walking on a trail, so it isn't like we could just say goodbye then and there. We had to walk back to our car and drop him off at his car. My boyfriend had the bright idea that we should get some lunch after our walk, even though I was doing my best to give him a look that said, "No, you crazy fuck. Why would you think I would want to spend any more time with this nut?" But it must not have been very effective, or my boyfriend was just ignoring it. Not sure. Either way, we ended up getting to the car and going to lunch. In the car I was driving, my boyfriend was in the passenger seat and our weirdo friend was in the back. As we're heading through the busy part of town, where all the shopping and restaurants are, I hear the distinctive sound of a belt buckle coming undone. Then I hear the worst sound imaginable. I peek back in the corner of my eye, and my suspicions are confirmed. This crazy fucker was full on jacking off in our back seat. I mean, pants way down, bare ass on the seat, beating it so hard like he wanted to rip it off. Instinctively, I felt sick to my stomach, and all the nervous energy I had throughout the day popped up into my head. I was trying not to shake and trying to ignore it and drive through the heavy traffic. I kinda had a freeze response, I guess. The whole time I kept thinking about the huge knife he had in his pocket, and obviously he was completely off his rocker. I was afraid to say anything or confront him because I didn't know how he would react. This part is nuts, but my boyfriend didn't even fucking seem to notice. The whole time he kept rambling on about God knows what. I couldn't listen to him because my thoughts were 100% focused on driving and trying to act like I didn't know what was going on in the back seat. We got to the restaurant and my boyfriend runs in to grab the food. I'm left alone in the car with our friend and I'm trying to act like I'm browsing my phone when really I'm watching and listening as hard as I can. We don't talk. My boyfriend gets back in the car and I complain that I'm tired and it's been a long day. Let's drop him off, etc. So I drive us back to our friend's car and he doesn't get out of the vehicle. He just sits there. I have to get a little rude and ask him to please get out so I can go home. He gets out of the car and walks over to the passenger side. I start getting really scared and I suspected the worst. He pulled a gun out of some kind of bag he had on the seat and he just walks over to our car with it. I don't know why the fuck I did this, but I was so pissed I just got out of my car and walked right up to him. I was maybe 3 feet away from him and could see it was a loaded 9mm. I kept asking him over and over again, "What are you doing?" Because apparently that's all my brain could think of. I told him to get into his car and go home. He never said anything during this whole time, just kind of cried and had this wild look in his eye. For whatever reason, he got back to his car and drove off. I told my boyfriend obviously we're never going to hang out with him again, and I didn't even want him to talk to him anymore. No contact. A few months pass, and he occasionally messages me through the PlayStation or texts my phone. He says a lot of random stuff, and I just ignore it. It turns out he moved to Tennessee, near Nashville. I don't know why. He had a roommate, and I think his girlfriend lived there. I'm not really sure about the situation. I think maybe he's turning his life around and getting a fresh start down there. I'm not interested in any kind of friendship with him, and I know he needs help beyond what I could offer. Again, I reached out to his sister and let her know that he had a gun. She managed to get it from him somehow, but it did little good in the end. I get a call around 11 p.m. one night that wakes me up. It's a man claiming he's a detective in Gallatin, Tennessee, and my heart skips a beat. I start sweating and immediately ask what happened. Apparently, my former friend stabbed someone to death on Halloween Day. I don't know all the details, and the articles about it are kind of sparse. The whole thing is really surreal, and I'm just feeling like I'm lucky that I didn't get shot last summer. This whole thing turned out way longer than I meant it to be, but that's the story. I'm still feeling creeped out by the whole ordeal, and I'm kind of feeling sick after writing this. I had an acquaintance in high school who had some issues. He had a disability. My school had a very progressive population, lots of anti-bullying campaigns. Of course, he was bullied a little bit, but the majority of the school was nice to him. He was very mean. He was constantly cussing at other kids and threatening them. I remember in 8th grade, we were in the same science class. We had to give a presentation on nuclear weapons and debate on whether dropping nukes on Japan was the right choice. He printed out pictures of the victims of the bombs. He kind of laughed a little while as he talked about it. He went into full detail about their deaths. Teacher had to tell him to stop and sit down. No one was laughing. Everyone was kind of creeped out. There was also another time a kid mocked him in the hallway. He turned around and said very calmly and confidently, "You won't be doing this when I show up with a 12 gauge. Are you Christian? I bet God won't save you." It sent chills down my body. From then out, I stayed as far away from him as possible. He lived with his grandparents, and they took great care of him. One night, his grandfather had came home, and there was an argument. The boy went into his grandparents' room and grabbed the .22 rifle and shot his grandfather multiple times. His grandfather died a few days later at the hospital. I was at juvenile court later on. I did something dumb and had to appear in front of a judge. Sure enough, I saw the boy. He had been locked up for a while. He was in a green jumpsuit and was handcuffed. He was being escorted into a courtroom ahead of the rest of us. He saw me and apparently recognized me. He smiled at me, but not a friendly smile, a creepy one. One that sent chills down my spine. I never saw him again after that, and I'm not really sure what happened to him. When I was 10, my female cousin and I were dropped off at the movie theater by my mom while she ran some errands in town. We decided to go see a horror movie called The Village. I am tall, so I looked older, and my cousin was 14 at the time. We got super bored and decided to leave, so we got up. We walked out and stood at the entrance of the movies and rang my mother to come pick us up. Not 5 minutes later, a couple, about 40, well dressed, came out, and we recognized them as being in the same movie room as we were. They walked over to us and started asking us questions like, "Why did you guys walk out? Did you not like the movie? How old are you?" We told them that we were bored, and I honestly forgot how old we told them that we were. We also told them that we were waiting for my mom to come pick us up. And they asked, "Do you want to wait for her at our place?" We told them no, and they asked, "Are you sure?" And something else I can't really remember. They then walked away from us, but not out of the movies, and started talking. A few minutes later they come back and asked us again, and then walked out. The dick behind the popcorn counter then said we couldn't wait inside and we had to go outside. It was a really small crappy place. We told him what happened and he either didn't believe us or didn't care because he still made us go. I think there's more to the conversation, but I can't really remember. I think my cousin told them that my mom wouldn't know that we were with them, and they said, "Ring her and tell her, or we'll ring her and tell her once we get to their house," or something along those lines. Sometimes I wonder if they were genuine, but who asked a pair of kids to go back to their place? This happened a few months ago. I was at a club for my friend's birthday, and we had a table with around a dozen friends with us. When we get there, a guy immediately starts hitting on me. He seemed super weird, and I had a boyfriend, so I politely declined his advances. Then shit got weird. While out, I feel like I see him everywhere, and it started to freak me out a bit. But at the time, I didn't have a sense of any danger. Fast forward an hour. I'm chatting with a friend from high school who happened to be the bartender. Creepy guy comes up and orders a drink for him and myself, which I decline, and explain to my bartender friend that we already have a table, so I'm good on drinks. Creepy guy did not like that. He gave me shit about not accepting his offer and that he was just trying to be nice. However, during his nice guy speech, he picked up my drink to refill it, which I again declined and asked him to excuse me while I chatted with my friend. I finished my drink, the one he picked up earlier, and finished it without thinking much more of the creeper. About 30 minutes later, I become sick and disoriented, and I had my friend help me to the restroom since I felt so dizzy. After a while, I felt sick again, and my female friend was nowhere to be seen, so I walked myself to the bathroom. While waiting at the door, the creeper swooped in and held on to my waist very tight and asked if I wanted to come to his table upstairs to meet his friends. I kept telling him no, that I needed to go back to my friends, and he began dragging me towards the stairs, telling me a list of disgusting perverse things that I refused to write here. At that point, I was terrified, but my legs literally did not work. He was carrying me up the stairs. As soon as he got up there, he requested his valet to go home. At this point, I knew I was in danger, but my purse was missing, and so was my phone. While he's waiting outside, the bouncer makes a comment about my behavior, and the creep shrugs it off as too much alcohol. As we are waiting for the valet, 6 of my friends burst out from behind the door and began screaming at the creeper, while one of the female grabs me and pulls me back inside. I passed out soon after and woke up about 5 p.m. the next day on my friend's couch. I thought I had alcohol poisoning until I went to the emergency room and found out that I was drugged with ketamine while out the night before. This guy intended to drug me and take me home with him. Since then, I have refused to go out without my boyfriend always around me. I avoid that bar at all costs in case that creeper ever comes back. And I know to watch my drink like a hawk whenever I'm out. A valuable life lesson learned from a terrifying experience. For a bit of background information, I'm a guy from Mississippi, and I was around 19 at the time this took place. I lived in a small trailer with my dad and brother for the first 16 years of my life, before my brother, who I'll call Gunner, moved out due to him and my father always fighting. After my brother moved out, my father and I moved a county away, therefore the trailer was left vacant. A couple years later, I started dating this girl, who we'll call Chelsea, and my brother was dating her sister, who we'll call Mariah. We all decided to move into the vacant trailer because at the time, there was no other option. We needed a place to stay fast, and that was our option. Keep in mind, at the time, my girlfriend had 2 kids and Mariah had 4. This is where the story begins. My brother had and still has a meth addiction, and it causes him to be violent and aggressive when he's high. The entire time he and Mariah were together, they would nonstop argue and fight. Several times it became physical and the police were called. All in all, the police were called 8 times while we lived together. Anyway, the first big event happened around Christmas of 2017. My brother had been high for 4 days and was trying to start an argument with Mariah just to get an altercation started. This is how he was when he was high. Tensions rose, and he wanted to take their 6-month-old son away and stay at her grandparents' house a quarter mile down the road. Mariah wasn't going to let him take him in this condition, so Gunner grabs one of his hunting rifles from my room and puts everyone at gunpoint and says, and I quote, "If anyone tries to take Cody away from me, I'll fucking kill you." At this point, everyone froze in fear. He was standing there with a 6-month-old baby in his arm, and a .308 caliber rifle in the other, pointing at me, Chelsea, Mariah, and the 5 other children. He then leaves out the back door and proceeds to walk to my grandparents' house in 30-degree weather with a 6-month-old baby with just a blanket. Chelsea and I drive down to my grandparents' house and end up calming him down long enough to convince him to give back Cody so we can get him home and make sure that he is safe and everyone else is safe. Not even 5 minutes later, my dad is pulling into the driveway where my brother was at to see what was going on. At the time, I was in the bathroom pissing, and when I walked out of the bathroom, my brother walks up to me so high that he pushes me onto the ground for no reason. For some reason, this just flips a switch. I get up, ready to fight, and my dad gets behind Gunner and puts him in the chokehold. Keep in mind, my dad is a big guy, around 5'11", but husky and strong. My brother is also 5'10", husky and strong as well, but he had his youth to his advantage, so my dad wasn't able to keep hold of him for long. I'm only 5'6", around 130 pounds. So when my dad is restraining my brother, I take the opportunity to punch my brother in the ribs as hard as I can, while I can. I mean, come on. What else are you going to do when you're this small in comparison? My brother finally breaks free and starts to swing on me. By a miracle, he never lands a punch, and I get out of there, and my father is able to subdue him without anyone getting hurt. He ended up just talking some shit and leaving with my father. The next incident happened a couple months after, around February. By the way, Mariah was still together with Gunner after everything that happened for some reason. I was at H&R Block filing my taxes when I get a call from Mariah, panicking, saying my brother had just beat the shit out of her and was cutting himself with a knife, telling me I needed to come home right away. I ended up getting home about 20 minutes later to find Mariah with a swollen face and my brother nowhere to be found. He came back about 10 minutes later and was wanting to get his belongings. I sat on the porch when he asked me if I would help him get his stuff. I told him, fuck no. Look what you did to Mariah's face. All of a sudden, he started swinging on me, and when I got up from the chair, he pulled my hoodie over my head like a pussy, and I ended up pushing him off the porch. When I got my hoodie off, my uncle that had brought him to the house made him get in the truck and leave before the cops got there. Mariah made a report to the cops, but she didn't press charges because they told her that she would have to go to jail too because of domestic violence. Yeah, sounds stupid, right? A couple weeks later, Mariah, Chelsea, and I were sitting at home, and Mariah asked if I would drive her down the road to get some weed. We lived in the back roads, where we had a weed dealer about a mile away. As we are driving to his house, we see my brother in someone's yard. Mariah wants to be petty, so she honked the horn as we pass. We pull up to the weed guy's house, and she gets her sack. And when we pull out of the driveway, we see my brother in my grandma's car coming downhill towards us. He gets about 50 feet away and swerves over into our lane. Thinking he was just trying to fuck with us, we think nothing about it until he's about 10 feet away and never gets over. So I hit the ditch to avoid him. He ends up swiping the car and pulls over and gets out and tries to pull me out of the car. We ended up going home to call the police because I had left my phone there. And the police couldn't do anything about it since we technically left the scene of an accident. I know, cops in my area are rather useless. We ended up totaling my grandma's car and completely fucking up the doors. My grandparents ended up giving me the car he totaled because my car was the exact same model as theirs and I could use their parts if I needed it. One day, while I was at work, my brother goes down to my house and takes the piece of steel and smashes out the windows of the car and even destroyed my mailbox. Once again, the cops didn't do shit about it. For the next couple weeks, my brother would send texts to Mariah saying that he's watching her and would even stay at the cemetery across the road from my house and watch us at like 3 a.m. just to see who came over. My brother was the type of guy that couldn't stand anyone being with his ex. He went as far to sneak into the house in broad daylight while Chelsea and I were at work and he left a note saying, "For Mariah, I'm watching you," while she took a nap with the kids. If you're wondering, our doors didn't really lock. That's how he got in. About a month later, Mariah gets back together with her ex-boyfriend and baby daddy to her other kids, and we'll call him Ricky. One morning, Chelsea and I leave for work at 6 a.m. and get about 20 minutes down the road when Mariah calls us, telling us that we need to come home because Gunnar had snuck down to our house through the woods around 10 or 11 o'clock at night and stayed in one of the vehicles all night waiting for us to leave so he could get inside and fight Ricky. Apparently, he tried to pull Ricky out of bed, but couldn't because he had a hold of the end of the bed. When he realized he couldn't, he started talking shit. And while this was all going on, Mariah snuck out to call the police. The police came but didn't do anything because my brother told him that the trailer belonged to my dad and that he had the right to be there. A couple days go by, and all of a sudden out of nowhere, Gunnar stops by with my two uncles while Chelsea, Ricky, and I are at home watching TV. He starts spouting off stuff to get Ricky to come outside to fight him. So Ricky puts on his boots and walks outside. As soon as he does, Gunnar grabs him by the throat and drives him into the kids' playhouse on the porch. I go behind Gunnar and pull him off, and when I do, Ricky gets up and starts throwing punches at Gunnar, landing a couple. They end up on the ground with Ricky wrapped around Gunnar, choking him until my uncles pulled them apart. Gunnar gets in the truck, still mouthing off, as they are leaving, and is visibly pissed when he sees that his head is all bruised up from getting tagged. The next day, Ricky drives down to my grandparents because the kids had told him that Mariah had gone down there to see Gunnar. I know, Mariah is absolutely stupid. He pulls up and Gunnar is telling him to leave and that this is his house. Ricky says he isn't leaving until Mariah comes outside. Gunnar says he's going to hit him in the head with the metal folding chair that was sitting on the porch. Ricky tries to call his bluff and walks up to him, and Gunnar hits him, dropping him to the ground. Gunnar gets on top of him and starts beating him until my grandpa comes outside and makes him get off. He comes home later with a couple of bruises, but nothing too serious. A couple days later, Mariah and Gunnar get into another fight because Gunnar was apparently cheating on her, and things escalated very quickly. Long story short, Gunnar is chasing after Mariah on a four-wheeler, shooting at her with a pistol while she is in the truck with her son. Like every time before, the cops didn't do shit. Mariah finally wised up and moved in with her mom to get away from Gunnar. And the day after she moved, Chelsea and I were working and came home to find our TV had been stolen. Mariah came back down to the trailer the next day to get the rest of her stuff when my brother saw her and stopped by to start another altercation. Things escalated again. Gunnar took the keys to Mariah's mother's car and threw them into the field next to our house. She jumped into the car and locked herself in there, trying to keep him from attacking her. My brother took a brick that was laying on the ground and tried to smash the window out. Somehow, by some miracle, the window never broke, so he decided to beat up the car instead. After he got tired, he finally left, and when we got off work, we searched the field by our house for 2 hours trying to find the keys. We never did, so the car was towed, which cost $100. Mariah's mother pressed charges, and he was charged with destruction of property, over $500 worth of damage, which made it a felony. The next day our air conditioners got stolen while we were at work, so that drew the line for us. We moved into one of our co-workers' house the next night, and after that, the problems with my brother stopped. We were finally able to sleep at night, knowing Gunnar wouldn't bother us anymore. Now it's 2020, and my brother has a warrant out for his arrest for not seeing his probation officer. It's bad to say, I honestly hope he goes to prison, so he stays away from us. Because a year after we moved, we ran into him a couple times, and he was nothing but trouble both those times. I'm sure I missed some things, but that's the majority of it. The story might not seem as scary as others you hear, but it was a nightmare to experience it firsthand. Some nights I laid awake, afraid to go to sleep, in fear of my brother coming in and killing us in our sleep. Things had gotten that bad. For anyone thinking about trying meth, please don't ever do it. It will completely ruin your life in a heartbeat and make you lose everything. Take it from experience. It's not worth it.
I nightmared for an unknown amount of time. Dreams you remember always seem to last all night. About a man looking through my windows at night and stalking the property. I was scared the whole dream, but ripped my door open and confronted them on the lawn. The man retreated, trying to explain, before transforming into a handicapped woman. I was still mad and afraid about the lurking, but then tried to be understanding of the lurker. Kind of a befriend them so they won't kill you sort of mindset, before waking in the morning. It was still dark, and being completely paralyzed physically, though I was awake with all my mental faculties, or so I thought. I saw someone in the doorway to my bedroom, and remembering my dream of the lurker, I was extremely afraid. I heard myself making some gurgling sounds, trying to scream for my boyfriend in the next room, but I couldn't. I even tried to flop my useless hand to my mouth to pry it open to scream. Once I realized I was powerless, I looked back at the doorway and saw that the bedroom door was closed, and likely had been all night. There was no way I'd seen someone standing within it. I was so tired from the experience and in general that I fell back asleep until my alarm. I woke up to my alarm and over coffee told my boyfriend of the dream in the episode. He went big-eyed, saying he had had nearly the same dream that night, minus the sleep terror. Except, he heard dirt crunching as if there were footsteps on the rocks in his dream. Now, consider that the lane behind our house has no out, and is laid with all quartz gravel. So this happened around a year ago, but it feels fresh in my mind because of how strange it was. But it probably won't be as crazy as most of the other stories here. First, some context. I was about to turn 20, and I was in my junior year of college. The college I attended was fairly small, but in a very large city. It's a private school, and instead of dorms, they rent out various apartments for the students, in residential apartment buildings in an upscale part of the city. I lived in one of them. This was considered on campus, in a one-bedroom apartment on the 17th floor with 2 other roommates. Most of the tenants in my building were older businessmen and models. However, there are several colleges in the area that brought in wealthy international students as well, so you'd see a few in the building every now and again. I believe it was a Friday night around 10 p.m. and my boyfriend, I'll call him Sam, and I were watching Netflix and having a glass of whiskey. My roommate and her boyfriend were asleep in the bedroom, but they come in a little later in the story. A few things to note. One of my roommates, I'll call her Amanda, had started living with her boyfriend at the time, who lived a few floors down from us. She was often in and out because she still kept most of her stuff, like clothes and makeup, in our apartment, due to the fact that our school had strict rules, and we had room checks once a month, so it had to look like she still lived there. Another thing was, we never locked our door if someone was awake in the apartment. Probably not the smartest thing, but hey, we were on the 17th floor in an upscale part of the city. We never had a problem before, and we felt safe. The last thing to note here is that the layout of our apartment is important to the story. When you walk in the front door, you're in a large foyer with a closet to the left and a bathroom to the right. There's a hallway straight ahead that branches off to another hallway, which leads to the left into the bedroom. If you pass that hallway and keep going straight, there's an open doorway into the kitchen immediately to the right. If you pass that, you enter the living room, which you can't see into or out of unless you are standing next to the doorway to the kitchen. Now, back to the story. Before Sam and I had finished our drinks, we heard the door open and closed. I assumed it was Amanda coming in to get clothes or something, but I didn't hear anything after the door shut. I thought maybe she had gone to the bathroom, but it was strange since she usually wears heels, and you can hear her walking around the apartment. After about a minute of silence, Sam and I hear someone speaking in a foreign language. We both turn around and look at each other with the same "that is not Amanda" expression on our faces. Slightly spooked and unsure of what is about to happen, Sam and I spring to our feet, and he grabs the pocket knife I had sitting out on my desk. We both stand against the wall, me behind Sam, knife held out slightly in front of him. You could not see us unless you were in the living room. We wait. It becomes clear there is more than one person in our apartment who should not be there. That's when we hear footsteps approaching the living room, and my heart is beating out of my chest. Then, a short Asian man, who looks to be maybe 19 or 20, walks into the room and locks eyes with us. He's wearing nothing but boxers. After a moment of silence and confusion, Sam blurts out, "Who are you?" The intruder looks at Sam, then at the knife, widens his eyes, and utters, and sprints out of the apartment. I assume his intruder friend followed because the door slammed shut and we didn't hear anything else. We ran to the foyer and locked and deadbolted the door. By the time Sam had done this, I'd already dialed 911 and had the operator on the phone. I give the woman our location and tell her what just occurred, and she dispatches a unit to our building. Sometime during this phone call, we hear loud banging on our front door with the sound of the door handle jiggling. They're back. I tell the operator what's going on as I'm giving details about the original encounter, and she's just trying to calm me down while these guys are banging loudly on our door trying to get back in. After I give all the details, I hang up and immediately text Amanda to not come upstairs under any circumstances. We then go to wake up my other roommate and her boyfriend in the bedroom, who are still sound asleep. As I'm doing this, the banging begins happening intermittently, every 30 seconds or so, for another few minutes. My roommate and her boyfriend came out and sat on the couch looking terrified, and watching and listening to all this go down. It's worth noting that these two are not the brightest of the bunch, but those are stories for another sub. We then hear a few less threatening knocks at the front door, so Sam and I venture out and check the peephole to make sure it's the police and not the two intruders. Sure enough, 3 officers in uniform are standing outside, so we open the door and we begin explaining the situation, giving a description of the guy we saw. We didn't see the other one, but they shouldn't be hard to recognize considering at least one of them was basically naked. As I'm talking to the officers, one of them turns to look to their left. Sure enough, the intruders are walking towards our door again. The officers excuse themselves, close the front door, and go to confront the 2 men. We couldn't hear much of what was going on behind the door, so we stood in the front room waiting for the officers to come back and give us the tea. After a few minutes, the officer knocks on the door again and tells us what they learned. Apparently, the 2 men did not speak much English, but from what they gathered, they were drunk. Like, really drunk. The men told them they were looking for the laundry room. It made sense to me at first, but looking back, I don't think that's what was going on. They had no laundry with them, and it was clear once you entered the front door that it was an apartment and not a laundry room at all. You certainly wouldn't continue walking past the kitchen and into an apartment living room if you were looking to do laundry. But who knows, maybe they were just that drunk. Here's my favorite part of the story. The officers found out the 2 men lived in our building, on our floor, just 2 doors down the hall. As I said before, it wasn't uncommon to see international college-age students in the building, and it could have simply been a harmless, drunken encounter. Something about the whole thing never sat right with me though, and I really felt like I was in danger. I don't recall ever seeing the intruder again after that, and I moved out a few months after. But to the drunken naked man who entered my apartment that night looking to do laundry, let's not meet again. He was my first kiss, and also my first abusive relationship. We started dating when I was a preteen. He was super attentive and protective of me from the very beginning. It wasn't until the 5th month when I started noticing the alarms going off loudly in my head. He had taken me on a cute roller skating date, and we had sat down for a bit to take a break when 2 of his friends showed up. At this point, the vibe from him was no longer safe. The smile he had 5 minutes beforehand was replaced with a look of pure hatred. He switched into this odd predator mode and told me to kiss him with tongue in front of his friends. I told him that I was just not ready to do something like that, and especially not in front of other people. He didn't like that answer and pulled my face to his and started forcing his tongue in my mouth. I was a pretty small girl, but luckily, I was able to push him away long enough to start running towards a more populated part of the skate rink. I told him to stay away from me while I waited for my mom to pick me up. I didn't tell my mom what happened because I was in shock and confused. I was young and I didn't want to get in trouble for kissing a boy, so I decided to just ignore him until I was able to process everything. After a week of successfully avoiding him at school, he worked up the nerve to try something again. He found me surrounded by a group of friends and decided to try his luck. I didn't even notice he was there until we were practically bumping elbows. Being that close to him definitely put me on edge, and I nearly shit myself when he started speaking to me. It was all pointless small talk until he realized I wasn't in the forgiving mood, and then his mood shifted like before, and he just started staring at me like I was the most disgusting human on the planet. I was holding one of those old portable CD players when he yanked it out of my hands and started trying to shove it in his bag in a shit attempt to steal it. I yelled at him to give it back and tried prying it from him, which he apparently took offense to because he punched me in the face with enough force to drop me to the ground. I obviously started crying, and we were both sent to the principal's office. His dad was the football coach, so he was able to talk to the principal into only requiring his son to attend detention once for his punishment. We didn't see each other too much after that, and thankfully, we ended up going to different high schools. Then, I ran into him at Taco Bell drive-thru my sophomore year. I didn't realize he was the cashier until I was at the window about to pay, and we made awkward eye contact. I pretended to not recognize him and hurried with the transaction until I was able to speed away. Unfortunately, he saw our chance meeting as a sign of fate and attempted to send the equivalent of a "you up" text to my Facebook profile. Unfortunately, I can never unsee his ultra cringy attempt at flirtation. "Hey, I think I saw you at Taco Bell today. I was the cashier, LOL. You're still pretty cute, and I was wondering if you wanted to send some booty pics." My response was an immediate block, and I made sure to let my sisters know about the incident because I just had to tell someone. If I had known then just how dangerous this teenage boy would become, I wouldn't have taken any of the incidents so lightly, but I'm not a psychic. After some awkward laughs, I moved on with my life and continued to date less shitty people. Fast forward to today, when my sister sends me an article from her local news report featuring my dear first boyfriend's picture. Apparently, he decided to stab someone in the throat at a popular venue when they tried defending a woman he was physically attacking. We dated nearly 10 years ago, but I still can't shake the feeling that I definitely dodged a bullet. It's a strange feeling when you realize that dangerous people are weaving in and out of your life without you even knowing before it's too late sometimes. According to the comments in the article, he had had a habit of assaulting women in his life and had a history of obsessive stalking. I'd imagine justice will be served swiftly due to the manner of the crimes and overwhelming evidence supporting a case against this psychopath. I surely hope we never meet again. This is going to be pretty lengthy, so I apologize in advance. I'll preface by saying that I live in a small town in the Midwest of about 300 people, basically in the middle of nowhere. I can remember my mother telling me a story when I was younger that has stuck with me since. My father was an over-the-road truck driver, so he wasn't around much. That left my mother to pretty much raise my little brother, little sister, and me on her own. One night, she was awoken by a bright light shining through her bedroom window. She said it was as if someone had parked their car and directly turned their bright headlights on, pointing toward her bedroom window. Her first instinct was to get up and check on us kids. She had noticed that the bright light wasn't confined to her own bedroom, as it was shining through every window in our house. She said that I was accounted for, as was my little sister, but she couldn't find my little brother, who was about 3 at the time. She's scouring the house and finally sees him in our laundry room, opening the back door that leads to our backyard. And as soon as he opens the door, the brilliant light shines in and she wakes up. She's accepting that this was all a dream when her eyes begin to focus on the dark of her bedroom. She sees a small figure at the foot of her bed. As she sits up to see what exactly it is, it scampers off into the darkness of our house, and then she wakes up again. A dream in a dream, she's telling herself. Later that day, she's hanging up laundry and conversing with our neighbor, who asks her a question. "Did you guys have a party late last night?" "No," my mother replies. "Why?" Our neighbor goes on to tell her that her and her husband had a disagreement the day before, and she decided to sleep in her son's room. At about 3 a.m., she was awoken by a bright light emanating from around our house. Fast forward to a few years ago. I own our old house and have children of my own. Now, to preface this next story, I should mention that our house is set overlooking the town cemetery. One evening after returning home, I'm carrying my youngest son into the house. I thought he was asleep when all of a sudden he starts wailing and screaming while pointing across to the graveyard. "Daddy, get inside. They're coming after us. They're going to take us. The green skeleton men are going to take us." So, this freaks me out a bit, and I turn to try and see if there's anything he's actually seeing. I don't see anything, but he continues losing it. Once inside, he's still hysterical. He wants me to lock the door and shut the shades. He absolutely refused to let me go out and get the groceries. It was bizarre to say the least. Later that night, he has another spell. It's about 2 a.m. when I hear him crying and yelling for me. I rush into his room and he's crying, begging me not to let them take him again. I kind of write this off as a nightmare, but I ask him where they're trying to take him, and he replies, "Where the bad Power Rangers are." I proceed to ask him where the bad Power Rangers are, and he replies, "A spaceship." Now, I don't know if it was just the imagination of a 4-year-old, or if his mind was trying to rationalize an actual traumatizing event, but I can't help but assume the two are connected. And it's the worst feeling in the world, trying to protect your child from a monster that you don't even know may exist. Fast forward again to this week. I started a paranormal conspiracy podcast earlier this year, where we talk about creepy stuff, and I have listener call-ins and discuss experiences and such. Well, I got this email this week from the son of our neighbor that saw the light over our house that night. The incident involving AJ and I went like this. I know it was the early 90s because I was in my 70s Chevelle. Somewhere between St. Mary's Church and where our stop is now, I was driving us home around 9 at night. No other traffic anywhere. Shortly before the highway curves left, the most intense bright white light appeared out of nowhere. It was like a flashlight being held against my eyes. Oddly enough, as blinding as it was, I could make out the outline of what I assumed was a man about my height. My first instinct was to jam on the brakes. As soon as I did, the light was gone. The car had died and all lights inside and outside were not functioning. After a few seconds, the lights came on and the car started again. AJ wouldn't even answer me when I asked him what we had hit. No damage, and I couldn't find anything anywhere. I drove to my mom and dad's, and AJ begged me not to get out of the car. He never mentioned it on the highway, but now insisted I stay in the car. I went in and got mom and told her everything. She went to talk to AJ, and he told the same story but refused to exit the car. He told her whatever we seen was still hiding under the car somewhere. My wife's question was, did this happen around the same time as the lights at your mom's house? His incident took place no more than a mile or so from our house, possibly the same or similar time as the lights over the house incident. So, I can't help but think they're all related, and wonder what about our small town has piqued something's interest so much. Thanks for listening. I was reading a story on this subreddit that reminded me of an event from over 20 years ago. In the second half of 1998, I had taken a job as a security guard at a plant that made locks. Being a kid, I usually worked one of 3 shifts, 4 p.m. to 12 a.m., 7:30 p.m. to 3:30 a.m., or 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. The 7:30 to 3:30 shift was just for extra coverage, so there were always 2 of us from 7:30 to midnight. It was a routine, boring job for the most part. We did our rounds, logged anything out of the ordinary, and watched a tiny monitor displaying the CCTV feed. Things went by in an almost painfully normal manner for 6 months. I worked, saved, bought a car, and planned to move. By late March of '99, I served my notice and prepared to head cross country. A new hire was brought in to fill my spot, a soft-spoken man named Calvin. As part of his training, Calvin spent time working at all hours. At night he was a shadow, working with myself and the other night guard, getting a feel for the plant's nocturnal routines. Most nights, he worked with myself and Amira, a female guard who was around my age. I was 18 at the time. Calvin, who was about a decade older, was quiet and polite, though something seemed to be missing. There's a spark that genuinely nice people seem to have, and he didn't possess it. Whenever he went on rounds with me, he'd ask questions about the job and make small talk. I noticed that he was a little odd, laughing at odd times and changing his tone mid-sentence. At the time, I chalked it up to him being awkward. That wouldn't last. One night, near the end of his first week, he went on rounds with Amira. When they returned to the office, I knew something was wrong. Normally talkative, she would barely say a word. Not sure what occurred, I waited until Calvin had gone to the restroom to ask. During their trip, everything had been normal until they reached the brass mill, a portion of the plant that shut down at 6 p.m. There were usually no employees there after that time, and no lights. They were making their way to a checkpoint on a landing atop a flight of stairs when the mood shifted. She told me that she turned around, only to find that he was right on top of her. Startled, she backed against the grating at the end of the landing, and he leaned in towards her, his face nearly touching hers. He flirted with her in a low voice, and when she mentioned his wedding band, he said that it would be over soon. From then on, I did the rounds, taking Calvin with me each time. The night ended without further incident, and I left a note for our supervisor detailing what had happened. The next night came and went with no Calvin. I did the rounds, while Amira stayed in the locked office. Same thing the night after. Then, on my second to last shift, I come in to find her freaking out. She found out why Calvin hadn't been at work. He had been arrested for murdering his wife. She had been dismembered and burned, parts of her body placed in a pond less than a mile from where we worked. That night and the next, Amira called the jail just to make sure they were still holding him. Based on the time frame, he had killed his wife months before he started the job. My family's from Oakland, California. This was 2012. I was 16, my brother was 12, and my parents were both in their mid-50s. One summer, we were on a road trip and ended up camping in the mountains above Lander, Wyoming. I remember sitting in the back seat behind my dad who was driving. We were on a dirt road above Sinks Canyon, and all the windows were open. It was July and very nice out. We pulled over by the turnout to one of the lakes to the right of us to look at the map. My parents weren't sure how to get to the campground on the other end of the several-mile road. About this time, a young lady came jogging from the other direction. I remember she was blonde, had on a yellow tank top and dark shorts. My dad waved out the window to her and called her over. He explained that we were lost and asked if she knew the area. She introduced herself as Amy. I sure do. If you keep following this, she motioned toward the road in front of us, it will take you to Lewis Lake. The campgrounds are going to be on your left. A few years later, I saw an episode of Disappeared that featured a runner who had gone missing in the late 1990s outside of Lander, Wyoming, and had never been found. When they showed her name, Amy Bechtel, and her photo, the hair on my neck immediately stood up. It was her. When we saw her, she appeared to be the same age and was wearing the same clothes described in the program. I showed my dad a few days later, but he didn't remember the specifics that I did. He remembered her name being Amy, but also thought that I was imagining things. My brother was asleep when this happened, and my mom didn't remember anything. But 5 years later, I know what I saw. It was Amy. I live in a small city in Romania, around 30,000 inhabitants. Romania isn't exactly known for their tolerance of gay people. It's not as bad as other places, such as Russia, but the situation is definitely not rosy here either. I get on Grindr and I meet this guy. He's 18 years old apparently. The guy didn't have a picture of his face as his PFP because it's too dangerous. He had a picture of a rose drawing. Most guys on Grindr here don't have pictures of themselves. We talked for a bit and I really liked the guy, and then we finally agreed to exchange face pictures. I sent him a selfie of myself, and he sends me a picture of a guy that I'd seen around our city. He was cute, and I really like him. So I told him, "Hey, I see you around the city all the time. I didn't know you were gay too." We talked and finally arranged to meet. I had some errands to run at the tailor shop. My cousin's bachelorette party is coming next week, and I had to adjust my favorite shirt, so I asked him to meet me in front of the tailor shop. The building in which the tailor shop is located has 4 stories. The ground floor is a clothes shop, which my aunt works at. The first floor is a storage facility, The third floor is a barber salon, and the fourth floor was a tailor shop. I go to the tailor shop, and then go to the clothes shop on the ground floor to visit my aunt and see how she's doing. As I'm looking out the window of the clothes shop, I notice that there are 5 guys, all of them in their late 20s, behind the building. None of them was the guy I had the picture of, and none of them even looked remotely close to what the guy looked like. I text the guy I was supposed to meet and asked him if he's made it to the tailor shop. As soon as I send the message, one of the 5 guys' phones lights up, and he started texting. As soon as he stopped texting, I get a notification from Grindr. I'm behind the tailor shop. I went there to smoke so no one would see me. Come smoke with me, winky face. I was terrified as I realized I wasn't going to meet the guy in the picture. He tries again to get me to go behind the tailor shop, and I try to get him to go to the side of it. There were no windows to the side of the building, so after a few tries, he agreed to meet me at the side. All 5 guys went to the side of the building. I peeked my head from the door, looked left and right, and as soon as I saw the coast was clear, I made a run for it. So, Grindr cutie, let's not meet.
When I was a teenager, I would often explore the deep web with my friends, specifically weird stuff on Hidden Wiki. There were definitely a lot of links to choose from. I never clicked on the violent links because I'm not into that. My friend Latrice told me to click on one that says new best friend. After doing so, it takes you to a page where you have to make a profile. I put the name Lisa on my profile. My real name is Susan. Once I made the profile, you are directed to a main page that has categories. They were silly, serious, smart, and smothering. We clicked smothering. I thought it was funny. After choosing, there was a list of people with their pictures, male and female. I clicked on a profile of a guy that had the name 5, like the number 5. I entered, and it didn't seem like someone who would be a smothering friend. When I was searching through his profile, I received a message from him asking if I were looking for a friend. I looked at Latrice, and she laughed, but also told me to respond yes. So we're messaging back and forth for maybe 30 minutes, and then Latrice had to go. I told him I'll be back on tomorrow, and he said okay. Maybe a week went by where I would talk to him every night. He seemed very nice, so we exchanged numbers so we could talk more. Everything seemed fine until I clicked on another profile and someone else messaged me. I started talking with this other person, but still was texting the guy 5, which I knew his real name now as William. The new guy had the name Bill on his profile. A day went by and he seemed cool, but then William randomly asked me why I was talking with Bill. I didn't know what to say, so I never responded. He kept texting with angry messages, so I blocked him. I didn't receive any texts, only a single message on that site, and it said soon. One day after school, my friend Latrice came over to have a sleepover. We got comfortable, went to my room, and did our usual of surfing through the web, being nosy. I brought up that guy. Then I received a text message that said, "Why'd you block me?" from a random number. I replied with a question mark. Then he replied, "It's me, William." He texted me from another number after I blocked him. I told Latrice how creepy this guy is. Then Latrice stopped me from talking because she thought she heard something. Then I heard a voice. "I'm not that creepy." We both responded by screaming and looking around. I saw someone coming from under my bed, so we ran screaming out of my room, and my mother called the cops. They didn't get him because he left through my window, and nothing could be traced back to him. I'm starting to think that he was both of the people I was talking to. That definitely opened my eyes to the dangers of the internet. I will never visit the dark web again. I'm a guy that loves to live life on the edge. So one day I was searching around on some weird sites on Tor. I saw a link that was named Craigslist. It wasn't one word. It was two words, like it was the guy named Craig and it was his list. I wanted to find out what this list was about, so I hit the link. All I saw were items for sale. The thing was, posted everywhere. It says that he delivers everything personally and will come to wherever you want to meet. So I wanted to see how authentic this was and ordered some shoes. Within minutes, I received a message from Craig. We messaged back and forth and he offered his phone number. I took it and we started to text. Basically the rest of the night about where to meet. We decided Walmart in the next town over from me, but he never told me where he lived. I figured it's less work for me. So a few days go by without any communication. Then Craig texts me one day, asking if today was a good day to receive my shoes. I said yes. He replied with okay. A few hours went by, and then he asked me if I was home alone and what's my address. I replied with why. It started to get weird. Then he dismissed it and asked my address again, even though we weren't even meeting at my house. So I asked why again. He then replied that he wanted to see if I would lie to him. After that, I didn't reply anymore, but he kept texting me. He kept saying that he was playing and didn't mean to freak me out. Then he became angry and started sending pictures from my webcam. After that, he sent my name and address with a on the way text. I called 6 of my friends over because I couldn't call the cops and tell them that I was on a illegal website and this guy is after me. Nothing happened after my friends came over, and nothing after that either. I know this doesn't seem too scary, but it definitely freaked me out. At first, I didn't understand why this guy's link was on the dark web and not the deep web. Now I know why. You can probably guess that I don't go on either one of those anymore. A few years ago, more like 10 years ago, I used to be big into visiting weird websites. I had a lot of time on my hand due to not playing sports, nor did I volunteer for anything at all in high school. I told my friend Mark that I was starting to get bored. Honestly, I was bored with what I was experiencing on these websites. He said I should go on the deep web. He and I used to go on the deep web, but never found anything. So I decided to search through some more stuff, a little deeper. I searched for hours every day for about 2.5 months. Still nothing that I hadn't seen already. I told Mark, and of course he said just visit the dark web. When I did go on the dark web, I saw chat rooms, all with different names. I came across one named I, as in EYE. It was all in caps. I entered the chat, but before entering the live chat, you are assigned a number. Mine was P34. I confirmed my number and entered. There were hundreds of people. The comments were coming in quick. At first, I didn't understand what was going on. The screen was black, then a name popped up on the screen that said Mr. Wiggles. The comments immediately stopped and a voice came over my speakers. Welcome, P34. Then his name disappeared off of the screen and the comments continued, everyone giving me welcomes. A few minutes go by, then a countdown from 10 pops up on the screen. Then the chat goes crazy. Once it reached the number 1, the screen went straight to what looks like a view from a camera just watching someone in what looks like at their home. I sat there watching this for 20 minutes and nothing happened, so I shut down my computer. The next day I went to school, had a normal day, went to Walmart, then I went home. I decided to go back on the same chat from before. I confirmed my number P34 and again, there were hundreds of people commenting. Mr. Wiggles popped up and just like before, the comments stopped. Across the screen it said, no new members tonight. Then the countdown started again. Everyone in the chat started going wild. The countdown finished and then it was showing the point of view from a camera again. But it was outside of a school. My school from earlier that day. At that point, I was intrigued. I couldn't tell if it was focused on a certain person or just watching the school. After 30 minutes of watching the video, our school bell rang and everyone started to come outside while whoever was recording was positioned across the street in the car. Once everyone came out, the person got out of the car and started to follow a crowd of kids. Everyone started to split from each other, and the person recording started to follow someone. It was my friend Mark. He had to be at least 100 feet behind him. I started to call Mark, but he didn't answer. I kept calling him as I watched the video, but nothing. The person followed him to his house and sat outside of his house for a few minutes. The man behind the camera finally said, "No parents are home." And he began to walk to Mark's house, rang the doorbell, and waited as he continued to record. A few seconds go by, and Mark opened the door. He looked confused and the guy said, "P34 sent me." And Mark looked afraid, then the camera shut off and everyone in the chat left. So I did too. I called Mark's house phone instead of his cell phone, and his mother answered. I asked for Mark and she said that she thought he was with me. I panicked. I then received a notification on my phone from my Gmail account. It said the sender was Mr. Wiggles. The message was, "I'm getting closer, P34. Mark says hi." I was shocked and didn't know what to do, so I called the cops. They didn't do anything about it because the email disappeared. I haven't been on the dark web since and no one has seen Mark. Still to this day, I receive messages with pictures of me in random places, along with the same written message that said, "It can happen anytime." I honestly wish I never went on the dark web. I was a senior in high school, and my science teacher assigned us lab partners. I got paired up with someone who I'll just call DJ for this story. People were laughing at me because DJ was known as a weirdo. I'm not trying to be mean or anything, but DJ was a weirdo. He never really knew how to make conversation, and sometimes he talks to himself. We had to work on a project, but DJ wasn't doing much. He said he was getting anxiety. It was a Friday and our project was never going to be finished on time. Somehow he agreed to come to my house. He couldn't come over directly after school, so I had to wait about 3 hours for him. I was upstairs watching TV and I heard the front door shut. I looked at the clock and it was 4:25 or something. His arrival was a little earlier than I expected. I shouted his name from the top of the stairs, but got no response. I shouted again, no response. So I just assumed that the wind shut the door, so I went back to watching TV. Around 20 minutes later, I got a text from my dad saying that he was working the night shift and couldn't be home. That's how it usually went with him. It was like 5 p.m. when DJ was dropped off at my house. We worked on a project and got food delivered to my house. We were working on a project in my room and it was around 9 p.m. and I was feeling a bit nauseous. I decided to lay down on my bed while DJ was working on a project. I told him I wasn't feeling well and he said that he would just keep working and just have his mom pick him up later. I didn't really feel comfortable with him staying while I was sleeping alone in his house. I was going to tell him, but he was too busy working and I passed out within seconds. I woke up to DJ standing over me, just looking at me. I looked at the clock and it was midnight. I was going to ask him what was he still doing here and what was he doing, but he spoke before me. He said his mom won't answer his calls and he wanted me to take him home. I was pretty annoyed and tried to convince him to just sleep on the couch, but he kept on refusing. I eventually got up and we got into my car and I started driving. When I drove off my street, DJ said something like this: "Gabe, I need to tell you something. and I need you to stay calm. I lost track of time and I had to go use the bathroom. And when I was walking back into your room, I saw a man crawling under your bed. I think those are the exact words he said. The man didn't notice DJ, and DJ pretended that he didn't see the man. I was scared, and I was getting goosebumps. I kept on asking him if he was telling the truth over and over again. He kept on saying yes. I called the cops, and they went to my house while I dropped off DJ. When I returned, the officer said they couldn't find anything, but they found a knife under my bed and a few stolen valuables. If DJ wasn't at my house that night, then I probably wouldn't be here to tell this horrifying story. And I can't thank DJ enough for possibly saving my life. This story happened recently. My name is Alice. My best friend Lily had recently dated a guy named Marvin for a couple of months, but had ended it with him due to his creepy stalking and possessiveness. She was pretty shaken up about it. A few of my colleagues at work were throwing a house party on the following Friday. I invited Lily to come with me, hoping she and I would have a good time and she could relax for a few hours. We got to the house and the party was already in full swing. Music was blasting. People were playing beer pong. There was a Mortal Kombat tournament going on, and the loser of the fights had to down shots. It was pretty awesome, and overall, everyone's having a good time. During the evening, Lily told me she was going to the bathroom upstairs for a cigarette. The reason she went in the bathroom is because, like I said, it was freezing cold outside, and the owner of the house didn't allow smoking inside the house. As Lily went upstairs, I looked around for a few drinks. I grabbed a beer for Lily and a vodka and Coke for myself. One of my friends came up to me and asked where Lily was. I told her she was upstairs in the bathroom and I asked her why, and she told me some guy was asking for her. I instantly knew who she was talking about. I ran upstairs to check if Lily was okay. I could hear on the other side of the bathroom door wrestling and muffled screaming. I instantly grabbed the door handle and tried to force my way in, but something was blocking it. I pushed harder and then suddenly I felt a burn on my arm. Marvin was burning my arm with a lit cigarette. Meanwhile, I could still hear Lily scream and I assume her mouth was covered. If you're wondering why no one came to help, as I mentioned earlier, the music was blasting and the bathroom was upstairs around the corner, so people couldn't even see what was going on. After a few intense moments of struggling, the door suddenly flung open and Marvin shoved Lily into me, causing us both to fall to the floor. Marvin then climbed out of the bathroom window and ran off. Lily wasn't hurt. She said Marvin just wanted to talk, but she didn't want to listen. And then he got angry and started to cover her mouth. Unfortunately, the story doesn't end there. Obviously, after that happened, we went home and decided Lily would stay at my house for the night. We sat up watching Friends and having a few glasses of wine before both of us passed out on the couch. I don't know what time it was, but I woke up later in the night needing to pee. I returned back to the couch ready to pass out again when I heard a knock on the window. I walked over to the blinds and took a peek through. To my surprise, it was Marvin on the other side of the window staring at me. At that point, Marvin ran toward the front door and started banging, trying to get inside. He was smashing the door so hard I honestly thought it was about to cave in. Lily was awake at that point and called 911. I shouted to Marvin, telling him the police were on their way. This was enough for him to flee the area. The police arrived shortly and we told them what happened. Oddly enough, that was the last time either of us heard or seen Marvin. I don't know if he got arrested or moved away. We're just glad that he's out of our lives, at least for now. People call me Yaya. This happened to me when I was a young girl, maybe 7 or 8. It was a Saturday afternoon and my mother and I were at a mall shopping. We went from store to store. Mostly for me. I was a spoiled kid. We went into a coat store, and I was pretty bored, so I would constantly walk away from my mother to play and stuff as I did in every other store. My mother would always call my name, and I'd go running to her. This time, I was playing in a round coat rack. My mother called my name, and I ran out. I ran right into this older man. Then he grabbed me. He grabbed me by my wrist and asked me why I was running. I told him because I have to get to my mom. He then told me he could take me to her, but I said no, and he let go. It was weird because I saw this man in almost every store he went to, but he never had any bags. After that store, I had to use the bathroom really bad, so I went while my mother went to the food court. I sat down to use it for maybe a minute when someone else came in. The person walked right up to my stall. At this point, I was just looking at the person's shoes. They were men's shoes. I was confused of why a man would be in here. Before I could look up, the man said,
"Hey, Yaya, everything okay in there? I'll come in if you want me to."
It was the man from the stores. I looked up, and I can see his eyes peeking through the crack of the door. He then started shaking the stall. I began to scream. I've never been so afraid in my life. Then two women walked into the bathroom, and the man took off. These women took me to my mother and told the police. They found him due to the cameras. I don't know what his intentions were, but the police said he probably would have kidnapped me. Who knows? From that time on, I would never leave my parents' side while in public. About 2 years ago, I got off of work at around 5 p.m., in which I did every day. I had the same routine: get off of work, then pick up my 4-year-old daughter from daycare. So I'll pick up my daughter, and we head to the grocery store to buy some food for the next few days. After shopping for about 15 minutes, I noticed that there was an older man in every aisle that we've been in, but he didn't have any groceries. After I noticed, we walked past him as we were heading toward the register, and he smiled at me and then waved at my daughter. As I'm taking my groceries out, the cashier asked me, "Is that your husband?" As she's pointing, I look in the direction that she pointed and saw that the man who waved at my daughter is now holding my daughter's hand and walking away with her. I ran to them, pushed him, and grabbed my daughter. I asked what he was doing, and he said she had to use the bathroom and he ran away. I called the police, but he was long gone by that time they got there. Later that night, I made sure my daughter slept in my bed, and in the middle of the night, I woke up to a sound. What is that? I grabbed my phone and turned on my flashlight as I scanned it around the room. To my horror, I saw that man from the grocery store crouched over in the corner of my room. I panicked, fumbled my phone, and I dropped it. I started screaming and grabbing my daughter. I saw the shadow of the man running out of my room, and I heard my house door open as he ran out. I called the police and made a report. Since then, I invested in a security system and a weapon. I'm also weary of people when I'm with my daughter now. I live in a woodland area where there's only 5 houses that are around me. So when the night falls, I'm used to seeing the glowing eyes of animals, hearing the sound of twigs and leaves crunching from animals, and yes, the calls too. But this event is still carved into my mind. Back on June 23rd of 2017, and around midnight, my cat wanted to go outside because he had to go use the bathroom, and we didn't like for him to use the litter box. Now, my cat usually spends around 15 to 20 minutes outside, which is usual for her because she loves to play out there. But when I went to the front door to let her in, since it was time to let her in, she wasn't there. It was about 1 in the morning, and I get a little worried, so I go outside and I called her name. So I walk around my front yard, and then I find her, sitting there, looking out into the woods. Nothing too serious, she probably just saw a possum go by. But that's not it. That's not it at all. As soon as I leaned back up, everything went silent. No crickets chirping, no tree frogs, no wind blowing, nothing. Besides me breathing, and then I saw it. A black, tall figure, roughly around 6 to 7 feet tall, dart behind the trees. I picked up my cat and I sprinted to the house. We went inside, locked all the doors, turned off all the lights besides the hallway, and I grabbed my flashlight and went back to where I saw that thing. And at the same spot, all the noises came back, and I shined the light where the black, tall figure was. Nothing. I asked one of my neighbors if they were in our yard. He asked me, why the hell would I be in your yard? I went back home and I still questioned if it was a person, a shadow creature, or just my mind playing a trick on me. To this day, I still wonder if it was something or someone in my yard. For this story, my name will be Charlie. Years ago, my first year of college, I lived in a dorm. But if only I knew what was going to happen. I earned a scholarship to college for baseball, and all the players lived in one dorm. Being that I was a freshman, they roomed me with a senior so he could show me what right looks like. He was a pretty tough guy who no one would mess with, so I felt like I was in good hands. It was the winter, and by that time of the school year, I was pretty set in my ways and comfortable. I was invited to a house party that one of the sororities were throwing, so I went with a few friends. When we got there, it was like any other party. People were outside, and some were inside having fun. While inside, there was music playing, along with people playing video games in one room, and it looked like a board game going on in the other. That was upstairs. After a while, I went upstairs to see why anyone would be playing a board game at a party. When I got to the room, I noticed that it was the most quiet room in the house, which was odd to me. When I walked in the room, there were 4 girls and a guy sitting at a table. I asked what was going on, and they said they were using the Ouija board. I thought it sounded interesting, so I joined. But I never really believed in that type of stuff. While we were messing with the board, they said that there was a girl in the room, but I think that one of the other people that were playing moved it, so I left. That's when unexplainable stuff would happen to me in my dorm. I'd hear laughing in our hallways at odd times of the night, knocks on the window, and I started to have bad dreams. I told my roommate, but he told me it was stress from our upcoming midterms. That went on for about 2 weeks. Then one night everything changed for both of us. I remember it being a Thursday night when this happened. I was asleep in the middle of the night, and all I heard was, Charlie, wake up. I remember making noises and being half asleep, but I acknowledged him. Then he said something that woke me up immediately.
Charlie, what the fuck is that in the corner?
I looked in the corner of the room and I swear there was a silhouette of a girl. I was so afraid that I jumped off the top bunk and I told my roommate to get up and run, but he was so petrified. He was under his covers quivering. Then she spoke.
Why do you seem so scared? All I wanted to do was play with you.
I told him I'm out and we both ran out of our room. He was yelling as she's talking. After that, we were both so shaken that we never went back to that room. We called the police, but when they came, they never found any girl. I don't know if it was because of the house party, Ouija board game, or coincidence, but that was a moment that I'll never forget. To this day, I still hear odd noises throughout the night wherever I go. When I was in high school, about 10 years ago, I was home alone while my mom went to pick up my brother. And before my mom left, she told me to bring the dogs in. Now we had 2 beagles, one that was friendly but barked loud, and an older one that we had gotten from a shelter that was extremely protective and was not afraid to show his teeth. I usually ignored her and left them outside for a bit. I was in the back part of the house and was on a computer when I heard a noise. I walked to our front room and saw a young guy near the front door looking inside my house. I stood slightly out of sight and saw him walk back and forth between our window and then back to the door. And then he tried opening the door. Then he literally threw himself against the door. Immediately, my blood went cold and I rushed to the back door and quietly yelled for the dogs to come in. They ran in and I herded them to the front room. Then I saw the mailbox slot open. I saw his eyes. He was looking right at me. Right away, my older beagle got on the defense and growled. It was more like, I'm gonna bite you type of growl, while the other one barked. I got my phone and called my mom and begged her to come back home, in which she did with my brother. They looked around and saw no other signs of entry. I triple check every door now, and even though those 2 dogs have passed away, I keep our current dog near me when I'm home alone. That was one of the scariest experiences I ever had in my life. This happened 9 years ago when I was 15 years old. It was a Friday morning at school, and my friend told me that she would spend the night. Throughout the day, we spoke about what we could do for entertainment, but by the end of the day, she let me know that she couldn't stay for the night. On my way home, my mother texted me to let me know that I would be home alone tonight because she picked up a shift from 7 to 7. She was a nurse and that happened frequently. My mother started dinner while I was watching TV in the living room. But as I'm watching TV, I randomly look out of the window because I heard a car going down the street, and like I usually do, I look at it because we live right at the end of a dead-end street. This car didn't stop, it just circled around and crept down the street. About 30 minutes later, I saw the same car while I was watching TV. It did the same thing, went to the end of the street very slowly and turned around. The windows were tinted, so I couldn't really see how many people were in there. It was around 6:30 when my mother was walking out of the door. It was the winter time, so it was already dark outside, but it was unusually warm also. So I threw my mother's food away because it was trash, and she could never cook, and I made a few bags of popcorn. I was content with that. I laid on our couch, turned on movies, and started to text my friends. It also became hot in there, so I opened a window that was behind the couch. My mother hated when I opened it up because there's no screen, so I opened it up just a few inches and laid back down. A few minutes later, someone knocked at the door. As I'm getting up, I can hear about 3 people talking, only because my window was open, but I don't think they noticed it because it sounded like they were whispering in a way where they definitely did not want me to hear. I opened the door, expecting to see a few people, but to my surprise, I only saw one. Parked a few houses down, I saw the car that kept riding up and down the street. But anyways, when I opened the door, the man asked me was Daryl home. I said that no, Daryl lives here. Then he asked me were my parents home, and I said no, my mother's gone for the night. He said okay, with a smirk on his face. Then he said sorry to bother you, and he left. I laid down, watching a few movies, then I dozed off. Maybe around midnight, I think. All of a sudden, I was awakened with a sound. I didn't know what it was. I looked at the clock and it said 3:02 a.m. Then I heard another noise. It was footsteps behind me outside of the window on my front porch. I continued to lay down flat on the couch. Then I stuck my head just above the back of the couch very slowly. I've never been so frightened in my life. There was a man pressing his face against my front window trying to look inside. I was frozen in fear. I don't think he could see me because I was right under him, and it was dark inside with the only light being my TV. Then the guy did something that almost made me scream. I laid flat again on the couch and the guy in the window said, "She's asleep right there. If she screams, I'll shut her up." He then started to lift the window. I ran in the kitchen to grab my mother's gun while he struggled with the window. As I'm running, I dialed 911 and put them on speaker. I explained the situation, ran to the window with the gun, pointed it, and told them that I would shoot, and the police are on the way. The guy was halfway inside when I held the gun to him. He froze while the other guys ran off the porch. I made the guy stay there when the police were on the way. He was arrested and my mother never took a night shift again. At the same time, I'm glad my mother taught me what to do in those type of situations because it could have ended up a lot worse. This happened when I was 14 years old and staying at a friend's house. It was a cold, misty, moonless October Friday night. Halloween was upon us and all the usual pranks that come along with it. In the weeks up to that night, the usual pranks of knocking on doors and running, friends knocking on windows to scare you, stuff like that. But this night was different. This night is what nightmares are made of. Recently, my friend's sister, who for this story we'll call Jamie, was being harassed and stalked by some guy who she didn't know. We just came back from a haunted house. Then we turned on the TV and started to watch The Exorcist in the living room. It had to be around 11 or midnight, and the dog started to bark at the back door. So I went to see what she was barking at, and I heard the fence rattle. I didn't think anything of it as it could have been the wind or an animal. So I went back in the living room and continued to watch TV with my friend. Then all of a sudden, Jamie screamed from her room. We ran to see what was going on. Jamie said someone was knocking on her window and saw someone run to the back of the house. Just then, we heard someone trying to pry open the sliding back door. And when I ran in there, I saw someone standing there with a ski mask and hoodie on. His eyes were void of feeling, void of any sense of morality. I made sure the extra lock was set, and he seen me do this and started to bang on the glass. Then all of a sudden, he took off running. I asked my friend if the front door was locked, and a look of terror came over his face. He ran to lock the front door, then all of a sudden it swung slightly open. Luckily, he got there in time to stop it from opening completely. The intruder got his arm inside the door. He kept pushing it open ever so slightly, but my friend yelled for me to help as Jamie was frozen and frightened, screaming. I ran as fast as I could and slammed my shoulder into the door, smashing the intruder's arm in between the door and the door jamb. He jerked his arm out enough that we could close the door and lock it. The stalker was screaming and banging on the door, yelling over and over, "Jamie, I'm gonna get you. If not tonight, it'll be another time. And I'm going to kill those kids for what they've done." I grabbed a baseball bat and my friend grabbed a shotgun out of the closet. We thought he was going to try and get back in. We called the police and waited what seems like hours before we went out to see if anyone was around. But all we found was handprints on windows and footprints in the mud leading to the backyard. The stalker's identity was never found out. And after that incident, Jamie was never bothered again. But after the incident, Jamie was never the same. She was quiet, distant, and it was hard for her to trust people. It took a long time for her to be herself again. It makes you think you never know who is watching you, who is following you in person or on social media. You don't know what their intent is, or if they have nefarious intentions. The world has become an information nightmare, and for that you never know who is spying, peeping, and lying, waiting to ambush you. You always have to be aware of your surroundings and ensure you are able to keep yourself safe. My name is Kevin. This story took place 7 years ago when I was 13. I had a sleepover at my friend Paul's house one night. This wasn't the first time we had a sleepover. What we would do is play video games until around 11 p.m. Then we would start trolling people on Facebook. And this night was no different. Paul and I spent the evening eating McDonald's, playing video games, and watching scary movies up until around 10:30 p.m. when we logged into Facebook using a fake account we created. It would send messages to people we knew. We came across one guy who lived in our area whose name was Frank. He was a black dude, buff, and had tattoos. For some reason, we thought it would be funny to prank call him as his phone number was listed in his bio. We had to ring twice before he picked up. He picked up with a firm, "Yeah." Paul made a joke about Frank and his appearance, and we both were laughing. Frank then started cursing and yelling, and we hung up the phone laughing our heads off. The rest of the night, we made more prank calls, and commented childish things on people's accounts. I think it was around 1 a.m. or something. Me and Paul were getting tired while watching a movie, and then we received a text from an unknown number. I asked who was that, and it said, "That's so funny," with a picture attached to it. After examining the picture properly, we saw it was a street sign that wasn't far from Paul's house. We both looked at each other, scared and confused. "What if they come to my house?" Paul asked. I tried to calm him down and think rationally. He wasn't at his house, only nearby. Maybe he is only guessing where we are to freak us out a bit. We carried on watching the movie, hoping the phone wouldn't go off again. About 10 minutes later, however, we received another text without a picture this time, and it read, "Look outside." Me and Paul froze in fear. I remember being so afraid to even move. The lights were off, so you couldn't see us from outside. So I got the courage to take a sneaky look through the blinds. I couldn't see anyone, not even a car. After scanning the street properly, I said, "Paul, there's no one out there." He checked as well. I told him it was probably just a text to scare us. He doesn't know where our house is exactly, like I said earlier. It didn't leave our minds, but we started to calm down a bit. Plus, we didn't receive a text message for a while now. And about an hour later, me and Paul went downstairs to make some noodles. As we were cooking, we get a phone call from an unknown number. Of course, it had to be that guy who had been texting us. I said, "Don't answer." The phone stopped ringing. Paul then texted the number saying, "I'm sorry if we upset you, but it was just a prank." The next thing that happened was the scariest thing I've ever experienced. A phone lit up just outside the kitchen window from the backyard, and a very large man was standing there looking at us. It was Frank. He looked so angry and held up a large knife and made a huge scratch into the window to where our necks were. We jumped out of our skin, screamed, and ran upstairs to Paul's parents. We told them there was a man outside. They came down and checked the backyard, and Frank was gone. We didn't tell the whole truth as we were afraid of getting in trouble. I don't think we slept the whole night. We still had sleepovers at Paul's house, but we never pranked or trolled anyone again. We also didn't hear anything from Frank, but we didn't need to. We got the message.